We're so excited to offer this adventure series. Welcome, I'm Julie Judkins. I'm the Director of Education and Outreach with the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. And I'm here with some amazing colleagues on the line, Von Tron and Alyssa Reck, and we've provided our regular education workshops for teachers. Last year, we took a hike up the trail, starting in Georgia with science and habitats of rattlesnakes. We went to Maine, exploring different subjects connected to the trail in each state with local educators and partners like flora, fauna, history, and culture. And this year, we're exploring cultural heritage, social, and natural history along the AT throughout public lands in the United States. So this series will cover a wide range of topics from how heritage and history can be expressed, to art and creative writing, to the importance of acknowledging native lands. So these sessions are a resource for educators, for students, for parents and guardians, for anyone interested in learning more about these topics. Please check out the ones you may have missed on our YouTube channel, which can be found on our Ed-Venture page and on the landing page. And a quick overview about the Appalachian Trail. Many of you know about the AT, that it's a unit of our national park system and a hiking trail that goes through 14 states from Georgia to Maine, built by volunteers and is taken care of by over 6,000 volunteers and partners still today. Our organization, ATC, is a nonprofit that works with hundreds of partners like the National Park Service or partner organizations like the Green Youth Foundation, and all the volunteers to make sure it's an experience that everyone can enjoy and learn from. We're so excited about today's session through this adventure series to tell more about different aspects of the trail, and the series allows us to talk about hiking and history, recreation, plants and animals, and the powerful healing that can come from walking. So let me introduce our amazing instructors. Stephen Moss is an environmental scientist and educator. As a scientist, he has worked in the public sector on UN-related projects in the Caribbean, including Stockholm Convention and Bahamas National Implementation Plan. In the private sector, he relayed his experience in ecotoxicology and worked on environmental remediation projects in the US and the Bahamas for Fortune 500 companies such as ExxonMobil and BP. He is a former adjunct professor of environmental science at Georgia State University and has held other academic appointments at Langston College of Technology and Georgia Military College. In 2014, he launched the Moss Group, which provides diversity, equity, and inclusion, mentorship, and environmental stewardship training services for public and private organizations. We're so lucky to work with him. And Ebony Preston, led by a call to action. Ebony is a management professional with background in nonprofit administration, program operations, and workforce development. Ebony currently serves as the Director of Operations at the Green Youth Foundation, a nonprofit whose mission is to engage underrepresented youth and young adults while connecting them to the outdoors, careers, and conservation. With a desire to see change in the world, she's a member of Georgia Conservancy's Generation Green Board, a member of Southeast Regional Council for National Parks and Conservation Association, a board member for the Next 100 Coalition and the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, and the Labor and Industry Chair for the Georgia NAACP. Ebony holds a Master of Business Administration and Master of Public Administration from Kennesaw State University, a Master of Science and Social Work from Columbia, and a Bachelor of Arts from Duke. Thank you so much for being with us today and leading us through this amazing session. And Stephen, you get us started.
Awesome. Well, I definitely want to welcome everyone. I'm very excited and delighted to have the opportunity to share some of these marvelous works with you. And I will also let Ebony say a few words, but very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Stephen's amazing, so I'm excited for him to be able to connect with you all.
All right. So today we'll be talking about creative writing for conservation, and we'll be putting it to you all, challenging everyone today to pick up the pen and paper or your phone or whatever other instruments you like to write your thoughts and ideas with, and to contribute your voice. And the title of today's program is Your Story Matters. And so what we're going to hope to do today is to reflect on the work of many individuals. Perhaps some of you, I'm already looking in the chat box, at some of your favorite poets. Some of you are very familiar with Henry David Thoreau, very familiar with perhaps Robert Frost. I see here Toni Morrison, yes, also one of my favorite poets. Mary Oliver, sure, one of the best well-known poets of all time. Maybe you're familiar with some of the work of John Muir. And so these are poets that we know very well. Today, we're going to lift up voices of others who perhaps you may not be as familiar with, but have also contributed and have written extensively and have been inspired by nature. We'll look at some of their work as poets. We'll also look at some powerful songwriters who've also taken their poetry or their creative writing skills and put them to music as well as another way to inspire others. So we'll look at some of that historical work, draw some inspiration, hopefully from some creative writers that you perhaps may not have read their work or maybe didn't know that they wrote extensively about nature and described the natural world with their pen. And then we'll talk a little bit about maybe some ideas that could inspire us to get into the conversation and to put forth a work that could inspire someone either now or perhaps in the future. So what's the plan for today? Well, we're going to, again, review some poems. There are lots of authors that are out there whose work perhaps haven't been heard, or maybe it's been a while since people have reflected on their work. We'll put together a few lanes for you as future writers and even current writers, those of you who currently write but maybe didn't know exactly where your nature work would sit. We have a few tracks to kind of get you on to see whether or not these are lanes that you would like to pursue in the future. And then, of course, at the end, we'll challenge you to create an original work. So we're looking to see at the end of this, not a polished product, nothing like that at all, but we do want to challenge you to step out with your pen and paper and your ideas and to also kind of dip your toe into this creative writing space. So a little bit about myself. I've been writing songs and poetry for most of my life. When I began my career as a scientist, I kind of got the feeling as I would talk about my artistic endeavors and my creative work that as a scientist, I had to be a bit more hard edge and not as poetic and creative. I had to kind of flow more in the logic and analytical reasoning part of things. So for many years, I didn't write, or if I wrote, I didn't share any of my work. And I definitely didn't think to incorporate any of my kind of scientific leanings or inspirations into my work. Especially in my younger years where I was trying to establish myself as a career scientist. I wanted to be taken seriously. And so I kind of put my creative, inspiration and motivations down, at least, around my peers. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that, no, wait a minute, my experiences as a scientist and my experiences in the outdoors and in nature, I can draw from those experiences and write and inspire others. And so, I've kind of picked up again the passion, not just to write, but to share. And I've been writing for a while, but not necessarily sharing. So I hope that perhaps some of that resonates with you. Maybe some of you have had careers in science or have always written, but really maybe wasn't comfortable sharing. And we want to kind of invite you to step out into this creative space and feel free to just share and to allow us to be inspired by your work. So that's kind of, at least my background on why I'm so passionate about this. Let's look at the first section of our workshop, Time Will Tell. And so when we look throughout history, of course, we are familiar with many of the great authors and writers of the past. And some of these authors you know very well, and some that I'm about to share with you, perhaps you didn't know how much they loved nature and was so passionate to include nature in their work. Here's a palette of famous authors, writers. And the reason why this is entitled Time Will Tell is because going back to the very, very beginning, we've seen writers of color, for example, especially expressed here, writing and sharing their thoughts and their passions about nature and about the natural world around them. If you look at the first person on the left side, Phyllis Wheatley, really the first one among the first writers of color, one of the first Black writers in America. Even in her enslavement, she was born in West Africa, but even in her enslavement, she was so passionate and saw so much and was inspired so much by the natural world that she wrote several poems. One of them we'll feature here, A Hymn to the Evening. So we'll look at that. We can also, of course, draw inspiration from famed poet Maya Angelou, who, of course, shared her work. We know much about, for example, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, that we know some of the more mainstream poems, but she's also written and talked about her experience as a Black person in nature and drew inspiration from the outdoors. And we'll look at one of her pieces as well on the Pulse of Morning, which she actually read at an inauguration. She was one of the only poets after Robert Frost. She was the second poet after Robert Frost to share a piece and read at a presidential inauguration. More recently, we can look at Amanda Gorman. You guys are probably familiar with her name and face. She was the youngest poet to share a piece at a presidential inauguration. She's also written pieces about nature. We'll share her piece entitled Earthrise today and draw inspiration from a younger voice, but a powerful and resilient voice nonetheless. And as we turn our attention to songwriters, those who have put their work to music, we can see Marvin Gaye, for example, someone who has written extensively about life in America, but also paused and inspired a generation of thinkers to consider environmental issues with his song that sold a million copies, Mercy, Mercy Me, the ecology, describing everything from, air pollution to mercury contamination, really robust and a real full understanding of what the environmental issues were at the time that he wrote the song. So lots to draw from. In a more playful context, we can look at the work of Bob Marley, maybe not for many considered to be a nature writer, but drew extensively from his upbringing in Jamaica. His home in Jamaica inspired the Three Little Birds song. We'll look at that and draw some inspiration there as well. So lots to cover here. So we would like to introduce you to some of these pieces if you haven't heard them already. If you have, please take a moment to reflect on them again and to think about, what is it that these writers and creative individuals sought to relate to us about their experience in the outdoors. So at this time, we'll take a moment and reflect on some of the pieces. So as we go through, I want you to consider these three questions. What is the author's message? What connections to nature are being made? How is the author making their connection to nature? And then, does this resonate with me? Is this a piece that I like? Maybe you might listen to it and go, that was okay. Next piece. And that's totally okay as well. But I do want you to reflect on why these authors chose to incorporate their understanding and their appreciation for the natural world in their work. So let's go ahead and start. I believe we'll start with Amanda. Any reflections or thoughts, please feel free to share them in the chat box as you reflect on the three questions that we posed earlier. Those three questions again, what is the author's message? What do you think the author is trying to convey? And then what connections to nature are being made? And how does that message resonate? Please feel free to share any thoughts and reflections. I know for me, one of the things that I'm familiar with Carl Sagan's speech, The Pale Blue Dot. And when I heard her reference that, I thought it was a nice way to pay homage, to Carl, but also to reflect on, what it means to take that photo from so far away and to have that image of our tiny planet, just a speck of dust. I think that's a poetic moment, maybe a visual one, but nonetheless something to reflect and think about. And I was happy that she referenced that in her piece. Certainly made some great references there, and really spurred us to action. It was really more of an action piece. Her message was that we have to act. Yeah, we have to. It's up to us. We are the stewards. We are the keepers of the land, and we need to do all that we can to make the changes that we need to make to keep our precious planet safe and secure for future generations. Absolutely, no time to waste. The time is now, and especially the message of what the future will look like, our young people having to continue this work of conservation and stewardship. Her obviously being one of those voices, and challenging us as the present generation to not forget that the future is really in many ways hinged on some of the actions that we do today. All right, let's pull up the next piece. If there are no other comments, please, we'll continue on. If you have any other thoughts or anything that comes to you, please go ahead and put them in the chat box. At this time, we'll reflect on another piece by Prince E.A. This one is entitled Man versus Earth. All right, reflections and thoughts. Again, the author's message. What connections are being made by the author to nature and the natural world that we live in? And then how does this resonate with you? What are your thoughts? How do you internalize what you just read and what you just heard? Humanity is a contradiction. Wow. Please feel free, if you would like also to share, you can unmute. If you'd like to reflect, you can unmute. You don't have to be limited to the chat box by any means. Yes, we are very blessed to be here. I think his referencing of the Goldilocks zone and the fact that we appear to be just right. That's definitely a moment of reflection for all of us. And also, in a way, kind of an obligation, the fact that we have kind of won the cosmic lottery, if you will, to really be more intentional about making changes. And I think one thing that really struck me about this video was the level of destruction, the level of of contamination and ruin that we have caused and to our planet just in a relatively short span of time, considering all of geologic history that we know and understand. We're all connected. Absolutely. Absolutely. Kind of gives a different spin to the idea of loving your neighbor. We often think of loving our neighbors as being other humans, but there are other species out there that live right next to us. How do we treat them? What's our impact to their existence? Definitely something to consider there. I think we have another piece. This is a piece presented by poet. She's honoring Phyllis Wheatley again, one of the most revered Black writers, again, among the first writers of the book of poetry in America. And this piece is entitled Hymn to the Evening. Awesome. Yeah, performed there by Claire Philippe. Very beautiful piece of literature. Again, as we think about that piece, I want you to reflect on those three questions. What is the author's message? What messaging is being conveyed? How does the message resonate, and what connections are being made by the author to nature? Listening and reading to draw inspiration from the work of, again, a writer who was at that particular moment enslaved. She was born in West Africa, but was able to learn to read. She was bought by the Wheatley family and was able to learn to read and write. And 300 or so years later, we can still celebrate her thought process. Very beautiful piece. Yes, Jennifer. Kind of a nod to the beauty of the natural world. I think one of the things that drew me to this piece was how her life must have been, perhaps in many ways, in opposition to the beauty that was around her at times. So seeing all this beauty in nature, but then perhaps looking in the mirror sometimes and not necessarily being able to see that beauty play out in her everyday life as a human being, and maybe not feeling that same sense of beauty, every day, as someone who wouldn't have been free to fully enjoy the natural world. Yeah, and maybe even turning to nature as that source of healing, as a way to kind of step out of her circumstance into a place where she can observe and be inspired. Okay, we're going to turn it over to Ebony to read this piece out for us. This is a piece by Lucille Clifton, well-known poet, discovered by another famed poet, Langston Hughes. And her work is very, very well known. She received the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize for her work. And here she reflects on Earth as nothing less than a living thing, an organism.
So, as Stephen said, the earth is a living thing, is a black shambling bear ruffling its wild back and tossing mountains into the sea, is a black hawk circling, the burying ground circling the bones picked clean and discarded, is a fish black blind in the belly of water, is a diamond blind in the black belly of coal, is a black and living thing, is a favorite child of the universe, feel her rolling hand in its kinky hair, feel her brushing it clean.
Lucille. The
Lucille,
earth is a living. I like how she goes back and forth between bear, hawk, and fish. Those are very, very different organisms. She is able to weave them in using the adjective black to kind of bring our thoughts together, and then in a poetic way compares all of that and just kind of brings in the feeling of rolling your hand through beautiful kinky hair of a black child, and how that connection also reflects the bigger story of us also as part of nature, and us, all of us, hawk, bear, fish, all of us residing on this planet and experiencing life in our own interesting way. Very powerful piece by Lucille Clifton. Do we have time for one more piece? Here's a piece by Langston Hughes, famed poet of the Harlem Renaissance era, and the person who discovered Lucille Clifton. He writes a piece here, "The Negro Speaks of Rivers," and talks about in the piece how he's visited all of these various different rivers, the Congo River, the Nile, and has drawn from those deep waters, and those waters have deepened his soul. And staying here, that his soul has grown deep, just like those rivers. And I hope that through listening and hearing some of those pieces, that your soul has also grown a bit deeper as you reflected on these amazing poets and their thoughts and reflections on nature. Next slide. So now we'll move into telling your stories. Now that we've drawn some inspiration from some poets of old, and also current leaders, current poets, let's look at how we can kind of dip our feet and get wet into this space. So let's think about some of the things and themes that have come out of our reflection earlier. So we've seen where poets have tackled beauty and aesthetics in nature, marveling at sunsets and marveling at bears and hawks, and looking at just the way the tapestry and the mosaic of the natural world. We've seen pieces that reflect environmental awareness and education, where giving you facts while the piece is being read, giving you important facts to help you consider and think about the natural world and increase your understanding of the natural world. And then we've looked at pieces that talk about nature and the human condition, our role as stewards, our role as conservation individuals who care and want to manage our natural resources. And there are other pieces that are a bit more abstract. We put together a Padlet for you all. And on that Padlet, it shows some of the pieces that we read. And there are also other pieces there. And some of those pieces, there's one in particular by a songwriter who he has a song called The Badlands. His name is Connor Youngblood. And in his piece, he's just basking in the space, in the landscape, and just whatever thoughts come to his mind as he reflects on the landscape, he's sharing with us. And so perhaps your style, or maybe your thought process is, I don't want to be tied down to any particular lane. I don't want to necessarily have to be educational or anything like that, or describe beauty. I just want to share what comes to my mind. So that if you prefer to go in that lane, we have the abstract, more improvisational lane for you. So as you think about a piece that you would like to write, something you would like to share, which of these 4 tracks, if you will, seem to resonate more with you? Anybody want to share? Please feel free to unmute, or if you just want to reflect in the chat box. Which of these lanes seem to fit you best based on your personal experience?
This is Colin. I prefer the abstract in the stream of consciousness.
Sure. And is that based on just your experiences in nature? Just there's so much to take in.
Yeah, I just like to wander out in the middle of nowhere and take it all in.
Absolutely. 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 Yeah, there's so much. And just, the sheer magnitude of all the sensations that you feel when you're in the outdoors.
The most amazing thing is the silence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. All right, Sandra saying the beauty, Alyssa, the beauty in nature. Anybody else? Anybody else? If you came in and you were listening to the song that I wrote entitled Into the Woods, that is definitely, my nod to beauty in nature. I just find so much joy in being in nature and being in the forest, being in the woods specifically, and just marveling at how trees are doing their work without saying a word. The silence, as was mentioned earlier. Yeah, there's just something to that, the beauty in that to me. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think I'd go along with the kind of the stream of consciousness path as well. Maybe not abstract, but ultra realistic.
So wanting to describe every detail and really trying to capture each and kind of sieve out each experience,
Right.
Yeah. Wow, almost recreating it on paper for someone to almost put themselves in that same position as if they were there. That's powerful. Okay. Julie says she's all about the human condition. Oh, you want to share a little bit about that, Julie? Why you want to make that connection?
Well, mostly because the way I make my way in the world is by feeling. How does this feel? How does that feel? And that's how I make decisions. And so I can just relate with it, and it's very relevant for me. Same with when I'm able to be alone in the outdoors. I have a lot that's like released that allows me to come back within a more grounded state.
Nice. Nice. That's good. Thanks for that share, Julie. All right, next slide. Let's look at. Let's jump in here. Here's a piece by Pulitzer Prize winning poet Gwendolyn Brooks. She writes in this piece, "Tornado at Talladega. Who is that bird reporting the storm after what came through to do some landscaping?" And in this piece, she's talking about the destructive power of nature and how nature can come into us. Nature can hit us in a rage almost. She's describing, this event where the storm just comes through and rips trees apart and completely devastates the environment. And everyone's coming out just standing there speechless. I thought it was a really great kind of way to flip that beauty of nature discussion on its head. Sure, nature's beautiful, sunsets are amazing, but you need to respect the fact that nature can come in and tear things up too. And I think I think Gwendolyn really, really hit that a nail on the head with this particular piece. You have to find that balance between the beauty of nature and also the awesome power and force that nature is, and in its power to destroy and to disrupt. And then even in that disruption, there's a renewal and a growth in that process. Even as storms come through, they disturb habitats and give organisms that perhaps might not have had the chance to thrive, an opportunity to thrive in that new space. And so there's a lot to unpack, but nature is a force that we must respect and honor. All right, next slide as we move through. So now we're in the last 15 minutes or so we want to give you a chance to take all that inspiration in and now get out a pen and paper and now find the lane that you feel most comfortable with. If it's beauty, go ahead and see if you can put together a small piece. Doesn't have to be finished or polished or anything like that. We would definitely like to encourage you, if you're an artist, if you're a visual person, go ahead and make some doodles and draw some flowers or sunsets, whatever makes the process flow. Also, if you're a kinesthetic person, you can feel free to, come off of the camera for a second and walk around and pace. I do that sometimes. Even if you want to go outside, you can do that while this is happening. And the emphasis here is on your personal experience in the outdoors. What does nature do for you? Just like these poets have expressed their thoughts and their feelings, how can you also find your voice and find inspiration in your outdoor and nature experiences. So whatever moves you for the next 5 minutes or so, but go ahead and craft something based on your inspiration.
I just want to kind of wrap here by saying, Lucille Clifton, the poet that you all heard me read earlier, said that poetry can be a matter of text and something to be studied, but it's also a way of living in the world. So for her, she didn't produce text with the purpose of being studied, but rather she did this work to try to express something that can otherwise be very difficult to express. So both simple and yet complex, it's a way to come to peace with the world. The artistry that you all did today doesn't have to be about answers, but rather questions and what you wonder rather than what you necessarily know. And then also, as we learned today, it can also be about strength and courage and just saying, what it is. Like, I like silence, like Colin said, I totally agree with that. But that's really powerful. But then just making that connection and why I'm here today. Thank you, Stefan, for letting me share this space with you. But it's to share my work with Greening Youth Foundation. So as we said earlier, we're a nonprofit whose mission is to engage underrepresented youth and young adults while connecting them to the outdoors and careers in conservation. And a few ways that we kind of fit into the fold here is in our participants' exposure to experiences and opportunities, careers and access, and even leadership within the environment. So in a second, Vaughn, if we have time, we're going to show you all a clip from one of our interns that participated in our HBCUI program that we do with the National Park Service. And she did exactly what you all do here today. And what's really cool about Jade, other than her amazing voice, as I said, she did this in the context of a national park. And she, like her colleagues, are making this into a career. So it's a really cool listen, even with the words that she's singing and the backdrop that they have.
I wanted to recommend as a resource for those of you who are interested in maybe reading and learning more about African-American nature poetry and all of the other amazing writers over the years. This book written by Camille Dungy catalogs 400 years of African-American nature poetry and all of the many luminaries that have contributed and shared their experiences in nature and the outdoors. So it's a fabulous book. It's a lot of resources, lots of really cool literature to reflect on. So definitely wanted to point you in that direction if you're interested in reading and experiencing more.
As a wrap up, I just want to thank again Stefan and Ebony for being with us and inspiring us with your magic and words. And I'm going to read a poem from this book that we just raffled by Ross Gay called Thank You. If you find yourself half naked and barefoot in the frosty grass, hearing again the earth's great sonorous moan that says you're here, you are the air of the now and gone, that says all you love will turn to dust and will meet you there. Not raise your fist, do not raise your fist, do not raise your small voice against it, and do not take cover. Instead, curl your toes into the grass, watch the cloud ascending from your lips, walk through the garden's dormant splendor, and say only thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for joining our adventure series today. We are excited about our adventure series in May coming up, so stay tuned. We'll publicize it on Facebook and on our website.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.